Welcome one more day to Space and Harmony. In a harmony, as many of you would pronounce in English probably. And remember, this is an opportunity to investigate deeper into ourselves, feeling the true origin of our being, which is basically the true reality, the tree of lives. And now that we are in the month of Taurus, I'm going to talk about certain expressions and manifestations that many people consider divine, but are really a part of the illusion we are experiencing. Taurus, the bull, is precisely associated with the material constriction, and Orion, we'll see there is a sort of dark history connected to this constellation. There is today a lot of talk about the wisdom from Orion, the Kabbalah, reincarnation, and many ideas treated in a context where people are still caught in the tree of knowledge of good and bad, not the tree of lives, where there is no division. And because of all this, many also come to believe that the first Adamic souls that came to be incarnated on Earth are equivalent to the primordial Adamic humanity that emerged from the source, but this is not true. The true primordial essence of humanity was never created and does not create, it simply grows. And in addition to all this, many speak of the cosmic Christ or the cosmic Messiah, but still having those ritualistic attitudes that have hypnotized humans since very long time ago. And all this is because of virus in the human psyche, which replicates the system of lies and oppression that came precisely from Orion, and it is based on mixed language, the mix of truth and lies. And we see it reflected on many myths and symbols, even modern science projects, such as those of NASA. But let's leave that for the moment. Let us first remember that in the fallen world, vibrations condition and distort our perception unless these vibrations are harmonized, in tune with the primordial source of true loving light in serenity. And let's realize that the vibrations are expressed in the form of fractal patterns that are repeated in loops, in cycles, gilgulim as they are known in Hebrew. And these become more and more complex. This is how the opposites separate, right and left, up and down, subject and object, male and female. And all this generates an abyss of perception that makes us ditzy, literally. It moves us away from the serene harmony of the Holy One, making us forget who we are, what are we doing here, why. And this chaos is what generates distress, insecurity, confusion, sadness. Therefore, we must recover our sense of being an expression of the Holy One, the monad, the great I Am, which manifests as different forms of I Amness in each one of us. And this is how we recover a sense of purpose, a direction in life, because we all have a divine mission. And the third aspect would be conscience. We have an intuition, a voice within, which tell us who we are, what are we doing here, why. And these three aspects are precisely the missing three spheres in the Sephiotic tree, which normally is presented with 10 spheres, and in a very confused way. When we feel the true reality of life, then we also perceive the background of fullness, which is always here and now. Then we sense an unconditional loving light that can embrace everything, and this is what helps us manifest in harmonia, in spite of all external chaos. But usually our responses as conditioned humans are very automatic, all because fallen humanity was programmed like a computer. We can even see this mirrored on the birth date, as I've shown in some previous videos, even in the other channel by Enharmonia. And now let's also realize that nothing that we perceive exists outside. Everything is a projection of binary programs, which are mostly infected with the divisive virus of religion, politics, and fallen science, all of which impose distorted views. Even psychology has already shown that the brain constructs what is perceived, not only biologically but also culturally. For example, if an iceberg falls into the sea and there is no one to listen to it, there is no iceberg falling into the sea because there is no one to perceive it. There are only vibrations, states of matter. There is even consciousness in all those atoms, but we cannot perceive them. Only by adopting the viewpoint of the Earth we would be able to perceive them, but this is something which is not accessible to us normally. And in the same way, when we listen to others, each person interprets the words based on their education and conditioning. And very often this is a problem. Sometimes there are people who insult me in the comments or say something which makes me feel they interpreted what I said in a completely different way, ignoring what I was really implying with the words. But as we know, many perceive according to what the God of this world allows them to see. And if we are poisoned by deception and hatred, then we can only perceive through those filters. And we must understand very clearly that our negative visions of reality are not perceived with our true mind, but rather with a foreign mind that was implanted into humanity. It is the psyche that we inherited from fallen souls, humans that came from other star systems in the form of souls. And to me, many of them were already cosmic abortions that ended up in this solar system, deceived by others who were above the food chain, so to say, all because the conditions established by architects who messed up with the fallen wisdom mentioned in Proverbs 8 and 9. And many believe those architects are good archangels, as you want to call them, but in the food chain, the tree of knowledge, every entity looks for their energetic food, whether positive or negative. And for this, many created what we can call farms of living beings. Even in the book of Genesis, we read that the soul of humanity, Adam, was meant to till the land of Adamah, while the animal side of Adam had to be dominant over other species. Nothing to do with love. There is no domination in true unconditional love. And we can think that the Adamic soul that was placed in the Garden of Eden was placed here to play the role of shepherd rulers and watchers over other species. And it was said that Adam was formed from the dust of Adamah, which was not this physical earth, but another dimension. And it is deduced from Hebrew terms on which some types of Kabbalah are based, that Adamah is associated with Mars, which in Hebrew is called Ma'adim. In the Sephirotic tree, the planet Mars is linked to Geburah, the sphere of power, and also to the color red, which also designates Adam. And numerous myths transmit that Mars was the planet of war, Ares in Latin, because it was inhabited by souls who did not make a good use of technology. And this seems to be repeating today. Even NASA has named projects under the name Ares, Orion, probably as a reminiscence of a forgotten past. And all this seems to indicate that all Adamic souls were exiled to this solar system, and they came from Orion, or even from Taurus, which is a close constellation. This looks like horns or like a plow, and this is why it's also associated with oxen and bulls. This might be the reason why ancient gods were represented with horns, a symbol of royalty. Orion and the bull are all over in ancient depictions, even in caves. In Lascaux, in France, we find the bull and the deer as well. That was an emblem. And all this is not so strange because even today, astrophysicists confirm that the nebula of Orion is where many stars were born. Some even try to speculate further, as the researcher Daniel Wilton, who links Orion to a cosmic Adam that would be the creator of Adam. And that is not far from the truth if we interpret that the cosmic Adam are stellar Adamic souls that fell. Later we will see that behind the Hebrew word that designates Orion, there is a great revelation. It's not a mere coincidence that great civilizations have venerated Orion. We also know that the three pyramids of Egypt, for example, were aligned with the Orion belt around 10,500 BC, before our common era. And in Egyptian religion, Orion was linked to Usar, Osiris in Greek, while the goddess Isis was linked to the star Sirius. And in ancient times, Orion was also seen as the constellation of the hunter, which is accompanied by a dog, the dog star Sirius, which is actually three stars, Sirius A, Sirius B, and Sirius C. And before this was discovered, the tribe of the Dogon in Mali knew that there was a third star in Sirius, and the priests claimed that they received that information from amphibious beings that came from Sirius. They call them Nomo. And this fits perfectly with the myth of Adapa, Oannes, which I already told in previous video. I also told you about my encounter and telepathic conversation with an amphibious being in another earthly dimension. So to me this is not so strange. Below I leave the link to the video. In spite of all this, cultures have not always been benevolent with Taurus and Orion. For example, in the myth of Gilgamesh, the epic of Gilgamesh, when the hero Gilgamesh goes with his companion Enkidu, and they defeat the monster Huwawa in the forest of the cedar, Inanna, the goddess of love and war, tried to seduce Gilgamesh, but he resisted. And as she felt very offended, she sent the bull of heaven to stop them. But then Enkidu grabbed the beast by the hindquarters and threw a paw of the bull at Inanna. Obviously, she became more enraged, and Anu, the god of the sky, condemned Enkidu to death. And for me, this is a detailed description of how repressing impulses of love and fighting against the body leads to the rebellion of nature. And this indicates that in Sumeria, the paradigm of true love that transforms and harmonizes impulses without repressing was not yet known. And another case about all this is the Greek myth of the labyrinth guarded by the Minotaur, the beast that was half bull, half man, the beast to which many virgins were sacrificed. And Princess Ariadne told Theseus that if he killed the beast, she would marry him. She was actually in love with him. And as he accepted, she gave him a ball of wool to find the exit at the end. And so it was, because Theseus defeated and killed the Minotaur, getting out alive from the labyrinth with the help of Ariadne's thread. And he even came out with another 13 attributes, which to me might be a symbol of the Tree of Lives and also the 13 aspects of the astrological wheel, which in ancient times were not just 12, but even 14 in some cases, because it's 12 plus the center plus a feminine missing sign. Even though all this is a falsification of the true Tree of Lives, because it was not known in ancient Greece. However, all this is a perfect allegory of the constrictive matrix in which we are apparently trapped. This is a matrix that devours souls, and we need to escape with the help of an inner light, but not with the help of the Luciferic astral light, but with the primordial light of divine love. And this was not known in the paradigm of the heroes, which was always violent, since they used the light of Prometheus, Lucifer, and they did not know the true I amness. Another good example was Mithras, the sun god. All the great heroes of antiquity use brute force, they kill bulls, and that never worked. And from Plato we learn that the ritual sacrifice of bulls was already practiced in Atlantis, and some come to interpret that these sacrifices were referring to the age of Taurus between 4000 and 2000 BC. And it is true that many temples in those ages have the bull as a symbol, but to me there is something else. The wild passions of humanity are represented with bulls and other animals, but they are usually depicted on the skies. And as I said, today astrophysicists have discovered that the Orion Nebula is the cradle of many stars, and ancient stories tell what happened in that region, at least indirectly. We hear about Orion wars. Curiously, astrophysicists also say that Orion is breaking apart, while the Pleiades, the 7 stars that can be watched at the right hand of Orion in the night sky, travel together, moved by an unknown force of gravity. Of course, science ignores that this is universal law, which is cultivated in those star systems from which many souls come to Earth to help. And there is actually an astrophysicist that sees a striking parallel between the passage of Job 38 and this phenomenon. Can you bind the ties of the Pleiades and untie the chains of Orion? This is the question of Elohim to Prophet Job. And obviously, in ancient times, sages were aware that Orion was disintegrating because of the wars that took place there, unlike the Pleiades, which is the origin of many souls or star seeds that come to help. And it is also very striking to see that in Hebrew, Orion is known as Kesil, which means fool, the one who goes on his own like a madman and like a wise Cree, someone that thinks he knows but he doesn't understand really. And this is actually symbolized in the first card of the Tarot, also known as the Fool, which goes with the hunter's baton and accompanied by an animal that bites him. Sometimes it's a dog, a reference to Sirius, obviously, and this is a perfect symbol for the nature that still bites the ass of humanity. To me, there is no doubt that all this relates to the souls that fell in the episode of Eve and the serpent. And for simplicity, we can see Eve as the psychic energy of the earth with which Adamic souls interacted. Remember that the Elohim, the architects, had made a suitable helpmate for the masculine side of Adam. And the tree of knowledge can be seen as the reptilian or amphibian creatures made by the fallen architects, the ancient serpent, in order to trap souls. And those species were actually the bodies in which the soul of Adam became trapped. Basically, what happened is that the Adamic soul that was exiled in this solar system, placed in the Garden of Eden, followed the voice of the reptilian mind while interacting with the psychic energies of the earth in certain creatures. And they thought that if they incarnated fully, they would be able to rule in the material world, they would acquire wisdom, as it is said in Genesis 3, and they would be like the Elohim, and even would become messiahs, saviors. This is even told in Hebrew accounts known as Midrashim. There is one which says that Adam saw that David in the future would be a righteous man that would give rise to the line of the Messiah. So Adam gave him 70 years. and Adam remained with 930 years. And this is how Adam fell into the material world. The very same expression Adam contains the initials of Adam, David, and Mashiach, Messiah. However, many Kabbalists see all this too cheerfully, as if Adam had to fall necessarily, as if David were an example of true love and righteousness, when in reality, according to the scriptures, he was a murderer. He killed thousands of people. And that is not love. Obviously, those are stories, but are based on certain codes. And the code of war and violence has nothing to do with the teachings of the true master. Now, the point is that the fall of the Adamic soul into the 4D world began to generate a soul offspring in a humanity that was more dense and came to be known as Cain, which had two natures. Cain was the personal soul, and Havel was the mind able to listen to divine conscience. In Egypt, they were known as the Ka and the Va. But Cain killed Abel, Havel, as you may know. And since then, there is a dominion of the Cainite nature of humanity, a mixture that came from Eve and the serpent. And this is how the human soul fell from the 4D dimensional experience into the 3D, which we are experiencing mostly nowadays, even though we can move inwards. However, some disembodied Adamic spirits, alien species we might say, repossess the souls of earthly bodies and earthly souls, which were known as the daughters of Adam in Genesis 6. And they gave rise to the famous Nephilim, the fallen ones, which existed just before the Mavul, the catastrophe known as the flood, that killed many of those creatures, even though some of those souls survived. And among them, there was the famous King Nimrod, the Hunter King, which was, what a coincidence, associated with Orion. And Nimrod not only appears as the one who built up the Tower of Babel, which can be seen as the ancient knowledge and technology, which was destroyed by the ruling gods of the planet, but Nimrod also stole true knowledge. And we can deduce he also generated the religion of Tammuz, a solar astral religion which is present in all of religions across the earth, especially those who use the cross as a main symbol. The cross represents the incarnation of the solar spirit into the four elements, the cross of matter. And Tammuz was associated with the Tau cross, which reminds me a lot of the Taulas of Menorca and the megaiths of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which are actually some of the oldest ones. And myths tell that King Nimrod married Semiramis, who was Ishtar, Inanna, his own mother. Part of the story is also present in the Bible. And when Nimrod was killed by Shem, his wife Semiramis said that her husband had become the god of the sun. And later on, she becomes pregnant and claims that this is a gift from the gods, and that the child she carried in her womb was the reincarnation of her husband. And that son is actually Tammuz, the solar god who is born precisely on December 25th, like so many other solar gods of other pagan religions. Actually, all the symbols of Christmas come from Babylon. For example, an old myth tells that Tammuz died attacked by a wild boar. He fell on a tree stump, and his blood made it grow again, giving rise to the evergreen tree, the sacred pine tree, which is venerated by ancient cultures and today in Christmas. The story even says that the mother of Tammuz, Semiramis, and other women deposited gifts at the foot of the regenerated tree in memory of Tammuz. And before that, they had wept for the death of Tammuz, giving rise to the tradition of the mourners, which is mentioned in Ezekiel 8:14. And they also fasted for 40 days. So this is obviously the origin of the Christian Lent, the 6 weeks before Easter, in which no meat can be eaten. Moreover, there was another tradition carried out by certain priests in which they sacrificed a wild boar on Easter Sunday and they ate it, as if they were reversing the death of Tammuz, who resurrects every year, bringing harvests. Another clear example are the Easter eggs, always associated with Ishtar, since they are symbols of fertility and sexuality. Easter actually sounds like Ishtar, and according to the myths, Ishtar was born from an egg in the Euphrates River. Ancient traditions even said that she claims her authority by making rabbits lay eggs. And since very ancient times, there have been rituals in which virgins are raped, and with the blood of the infants born to them, someone paints the eggs consecrated to Ishtar. So the famous Easter eggs that many consume and produce nowadays are not so innocent after all. Let everyone draw their own conclusions. To me, it seems that the religions of a few mentally deranged souls continue to confuse people, leading them away from the true will and conscience that have been given to us by the primordial source. And all this has to do with the Adamic souls who did not till their own inner land, who did not remain as watchers to learn, and they interfered with the world of reptilian races that they could not understand. And many of them came here to rule over others. As Plato tells in the Book 10 of the Republic, those souls who live in heavenly realms in previous ages tried to maintain their own status after incarnating on earth. And this is how they became the tyrants of all times and of nowadays as well. They are the same ones. And do not forget the account of Plato, which I told in a previous video. The ruling gods divided the earth into sections, and the god Poseidon fathered 10 kings in Atlantis. And from there came many traditions of politics and government and religion as well. And as you may know, Atlantis was destroyed by uncontrolled natural forces, which those fallen humans had unleashed because they enraged those who were in charge of the planet. So more than saviors, they were catastrophe makers. And in the middle of the war between Elohim and Baal, Zeus and Prometheus, there remains humanity, ignorant of all this. And people have inherited a mentality of herd, of cattle, but also of domination. The worshippers of the old gods somehow try to be like them. And the tragedy is that almost everyone is a slave in some way or another. Everyone is fooled in the change established by foreign architects. So we must overcome all this programming that we have been implemented and realize that all this comes from fools of Orion who wanted to break the rules and fell prey to the serpent mind that was implanted in them. And it's very interesting to see the reptilian concepts embedded in ancient religions. For instance, the Egyptologist Gerald Massey came to say that Messiah comes from Messe, which in Egypt was the sacred crocodile, and the fat of this animal was used to anoint those who were meant to be kings, the pharaohs. They were anointed to reign with the intelligence of Osiris and Horus from Orion. And that is why the ox, Apis, was represented with the anointed solar king, who was called also Yaosha, as a falsification, I think, of the true primordial Adam. By trying to emulate the old purpose of savior humanity, of light, they elaborated a tradition of messiahs and the famous Christos Serapis in Greek, who sacrifices himself by incarnating himself on the planet to wash the human sins with his blood. All this is based on sacrifice, on blood, on violence. This has nothing to do with the true message of light. All this is deception, but many people still believe that. And we also know that pharaohs underwent a ritual of uniting the Ka, or personal soul, with the Pa, or spiritual soul, the mind, to form the Ah, an immortal soul which is able to dwell with the gods in the underworld, the kingdom of Osiris. And we all have already seen what these reptilian alien souls have caused with this technology and religion. And nowadays, New Agers come to say that they had good intentions, but it's also known that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And if you pay attention, the wisdom of the old Adamic reptilian messiahs always works from below, focusing only on the material knowledge, on technology, and their supposedly spiritual anointing, spiritual evolution, always comes from sublimating the accumulated psychic energy which lies in the sacrum bone, the coccyx. This is where the serpent energy lies dormant, the Kundalini energy, as it is said in India. And that is why they place so much importance on not wasting sexual energy during personal lunar moon periods, and then transform it. That was also related to the tradition of circumcision, with which they tried to avoid onanism. And this tradition was in Egypt, and supposedly Moses taught that to Israel. However, today Jews practice a four-step circumcision which was not present in the Torah teachings. They practice even rabbinical teachings which were not taught, even in the written Torah. And transmutation is a real phenomenon, but only creates a lower vessel, a lower covering, a subtle body that receives deeper light. This is not a divine Merkaba. In itself, the Kundalini energy is a deceptive psychic energy which operates on a sexual, emotional, intellectual, and even a spiritual level. It can be very deceptive because it gives the false impression that there is a spiritual evolution. Certain states of euphoria or bliss or mental powers give this false sense of growth, but they deceive many people. Many of the supposedly divine phenomena of yogis, saints, and priests are mere effects of Kundalini, including the false Holy Spirit operating in the churches today. Now, in spite of all this, those of us who receive the true light must keep in mind that the light of our true being does not come from below. It's not the Luciferic astral light, but from the center of the universe, if you wish. And it comes to purify, to rescue what was lost. And that involves letting the old Adamic genetics die within us, assuming the pure essence that comes from the original source. This is something that religions and diverse wisdom do not understand, because they continue with the same pride of always, with rituals brought by fallen souls that we can call the messiahs of Orion. And the truth is that the Nazarene master, Yahushua, overcame these traditions. He did not have anything to do with old religions. And his idea was basically manifesting the true DNA of primordial Adam, who is the first manifestation of the infinite being. And his teaching basically is to go back to the tree of life, to manifest the original DNA of primordial Adam, the first emanation, manifestation of the infinite, limitless being. With this primordial DNA, we can manifest true unconditional love and modified life, integral conscience, and infinite serenity. So we can say that the true origin of immortal light and love manifests as a collective divine song, a humanity that can never fall because it knows the true origin and also the traps of darkness. But we must open our heart to receive and manifest this new DNA which is the true Adam. And obviously, if you are listening to this and feel drawn to this message, it's because you already have that DNA, at least as a seed. Maybe you have an embryo soul already growing, or a baby soul from the primordial humanity. But realize we have a divine purpose, a divine mission. Even in the Gospel of John, it is said that no one has seen God, even though it's the infinite being. He who dwells in the bosom of the Father has made him known. Now, the bosom of the Father is the solar plexus of the primordial man, whose invisible head is fully merged with the infinite absolute Sun. Now, his solar plexus are all the primordial solar systems, and this can be seen as the nerves of a cosmic head, a cosmic brain, to which we are in turn connected as the collective body of the souls of light, and the collective body is the Holy Spirit. This was even expressed by Paul, but obviously in a religious language that was poorly translated afterwards. He said, Christ is the head of the church and God is the head of the Messiah, but this is an awful translation, because it's really saying the cosmic brain that enables universal conscience is the head of the call-out ones, those who have conscience, and the primordial origin is the head of the cosmic brain. Cosmic head and cosmic body are the primordial Adam. And primordial Adam can also be seen as Yud He Vav He, the divine DNA, the vehicle or divine Merkaba. In him dwells the fullness of divinity. Even Paul wrote that. And when Yahushua manifested himself on earth, he was as human as we are, but his divine soul was a manifested neuron from the Father's bosom, because his level of conscience was Yehidah. He was fully connected to the Infinite One, the cosmic body connected to the cosmic head. And to understand this, let's think that according to Hebrew wisdom, there are 5 basic states of conscience and 5 types of soul as well. The first is Nefesh, which is the soul centered in itself, in the vitality of the physical body, or the emotions. Then the Ruach is the soul that is self-centered, but also a little bit centered on others. The Neshama is the totally altruistic mental soul that can merge with others fully. Chaya is the will of life that emanates that mental soul. And finally we have Yehidah, which is the full connection with infinity. And by pointing out a way to express this new genome of light and contaminate light, the Nazarene, Yahushua, accelerated the process for the integration of fallen humanity, which can now stabilize the Neshama, the mental spiritual mind, help us manifest a Ruach Hayah, the immortal personality with the will of life, and who knows, someone may even appear manifesting the infinite connection like the Nazarene, an expression of Yehidah. But let's say today the body of the primordial Adam is being born, an awakening within the fallen Adamic souls that we have. However, not all souls can manifest the primordial light in the same way, because many have mixtures of genetics from many fallen places, the Earth, Orion, other systems that were hijacked by draconian ways of feeling and thinking. On the other hand, there are genetics that are more helpful, those from the Pleiades and Andromeda, the galaxy of Andromeda. Andros means man, and Medea is the symbol of consciousness. Although in the myth, Andromeda was trapped by monsters and she had to be rescued by Perseus. Anyway, it's a true helpful genome. And there are obviously other star systems from which many souls come to incarnate and help. And all this mixture is what generates so much confusion within us. In spite of all this, there is nothing that the true primordial humanity cannot overcome. Unconditional love implies that primordial light is always willing to go through darkness, even from before the fall. This is even stated in Revelation 13. The Lamb was slain before the fall of the cosmos. And this not only means the infinite light foresaw what was going to happen. Let's say the Holy One is willing to strip off some of his light garments to inhabit darkness and seed the genetics of true life within fallen atomic souls so that the One can release them from within. You are the light of the cosmos, the Master said. Therefore, our true vehicle of light, our true Merkaba, comes from the tree of life. It's not the artificial crafts that we see on Earth, Orion, and other fallen systems. The first Adam was made a psychic soul, and the last Adam was made a vivifying spirit, life-giving spirit. That's in 1 Corinthians 15:45. And with this in mind, we have to see that reincarnation is a trap, obviously, because it keeps Adamic souls in a process of recycling, condemned to make new mistakes, because with these bodies full of traps, everyone can make mistakes. We constantly make short circuits, and we have to pay for them in a blind system. This is how many souls are forced to come back over and over again. But I have already spoken about this in previous videos about reincarnation. So for now, let's leave this. And do not forget that the true blessing is manifesting this unconditional love, a life which is not subject to any external Lord or God, because everything comes from within, from the true single I amness, which is the only one, and also the giver of our conscience in serene, infinite bliss. So thank you very much for keeping there, listening, and if this has been inspiring to you, please give some thumbs up, share this with all those who might understand, click on the bell if you subscribe and want to receive weekly notifications, and until the next time, may the true heart manifest in all of you.